All right, back here we are, and thank you, Mike, as always. Mike's I'm telling you, the nicest guy. I've been doing this business for a long time. He's the nicest guy in it. All right, joining me right now is a retired Connecticut Superior Court judge, and we call him the truth teller. It's John Nazzaro. Judge, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. So glad to be here with you this morning.
Listen, I want to cover a couple of things, and there's nobody better out there to do that than you. And we talked about this a couple of times on my morning show, but I want to bring it to everybody across the country. And I just want to start with the constitutionality of the deportation of 12 million people. Now, this is what Trump says he's going to do. Homan is on board with this. But some of these states and some of these governors, some of these mayors and some of these sanctuary cities don't want to do it, Judge. So how does that work?
Well, this is going to be a big ask because I don't think the federal government has the infrastructure. They don't have the judges that are necessary, the lawyers that are necessary. There are thousands and thousands of cases. What we've seen under the Biden administration and even under the Obama administration was a policy of non-enforcement. So now if we're going to call in millions of cases, just think about the logistics. I know that each attorney with ICE, Homeland Security, has approximately 6,000 cases. And that's a lot of cases. And that means when they get a continuance, they're continuing them out a couple of years. So what do we know? The Constitution protects naturalized citizens. So if you were born here on terra firma, that's considered the United States of America, arguably you cannot deport that person. That person has inalienable rights. On the other hand, if you're a foreign-born individual, a resident alien who there exists a final order of deportation, you got a serious problem. And there are folks who have that order, but ICE has not come to get them. And I think that's what the president will be focusing on.
All right, talk to me about, though, the individual, let's say, obstacles that are in the way, because some of these states, Connecticut's one, California's one, not New York, maybe not so much in the city anymore because they've seen the error of their ways, Judge. But if they say, you can't come and get these folks, how does Homan and the crew handle that?
Well, this is a problem, and it exists in the blue states. Like you said, a lack of cooperation in our state of Connecticut. The Chief Justice and indeed the governor and other states have indicated they will not cooperate. It's an impediment. It doesn't mean that ICE can't do their job, but you have a confrontation. And there have been situations where you have ICE agents with their Kevlar vests literally waiting outside the courthouse, state courthouses, waiting to legitimately take a person into custody. So states will not cooperate, can't go into the courthouse, arguably, and we don't want a constitutional confrontation, an 11th Amendment issue, conflict between states' rights versus the federal government. The federal government has a right to execute its policy. And I think under President Trump, he's made it clear he's going to endeavor to do that.
Okay, but what happens? Just give me a scenario if you can. And we're talking to Judge Nazzaro, Superior Court judge in Connecticut. And what happens if we'll continue to use Connecticut as an example. Let's say Lamont says, no, we're not going to allow ICE to do this. Can Homan come and charge these people with obstruction of justice? Or in some, he actually said the word treason a couple of times. How does that work?
I mean, it could happen in the theoretical. Will it? It's not a good thing. And again, practically, how do you handle that? And you're going to have a legitimate basis of the government denying the federal government, state government denying federal authorities to come in. And this has happened, and it's been frustrating. I know there have been situations anecdotally where you have a person with a final order of deportation. ICE has requested the state to hold that person. They go into state court, and then they're released into the community. Right. And the state snubs its nose at the federal government. It's happening all the time. But I'll bet that there will be legislative consequences. President Trump will push the congressman to indicate penalties, denying federal relief for those states who do not cooperate. It's the same concept with not cooperating with sanctuary cities or states. And so how far do we want to push the issue? How much resources do we want to devote to it? That's yet to be seen.
Judge John Nazzaro is with us on the Mike Gallagher Show, and we always appreciate him coming on. He's a great guest on my morning show, bringing him on again to the national stage so everybody else can get a look at him. We have similar hairstyles. I think that was an accident, though. Let me ask you.
Barber. Yeah.
Let me ask you. Donald Trump, he's dominated the legal landscape in 2024, and there's a lot there. What do you see happening to him for him as far as 2025 comes rolling around?
Well, it's fascinating because one of the big things, and we've talked about this, is he has conservative justices controlling the United States Supreme Court. And that means that they're going to be sympathetic to the concept of a president exercising authority. They've already ruled in this past case, probably the most significant case, about the president is immune from criminal prosecution for those acts which could be considered in an official capacity. That doesn't mean he's going to escape justice in the civil arena. Just yesterday, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the verdict involving Gene Carroll, and he was ordered to pay $5 million by a jury, and that apparently is going to stand. The president's going to challenge that, and it's going to probably go to the United States Supreme Court. These are questions that have never been dealt with before. We saw for the first time a former president indicted and convicted on felony offenses. And I don't think that the U.S. attorneys will back down those that survive. And you can rest assured, every Democratic, every left-leaning U.S. attorney, if you can find one, they're going to be asked to tender their resignations, and there's going to be a huge policy shift. So Donald Trump is going to push the envelope. We know that. He's done it before. Past behavior is an indication of future performance.
So this case that he just, they decided against him and technically lost, from what I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, she just needed to prove that it might have happened. Does that sound right?
No, actually, the civil standard in most states and in this particular jurisdiction is proof by a fair preponderance. Did it probably occur?
Probably.
More probable than not, okay? 50%, 51%.
Right.
It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And this was a civil judgment. And the law is that a former president is not immune from a civil judgment.
Right.
Former presidents such as William Clinton, you might remember, was ordered to sit for a deposition in a sexual misconduct type of claim. So the verdict stands, and that's the ruling of the Second Circuit Court of Opinions out of New York.
Right.
And so we'll see. He will challenge it. I'm sure he will attempt to have the United States Supreme Court review it. With a majority of conservative justices, they may take it. Case of first impression.
Right. How about in the rest of these felonies, supposedly, that he has been convicted of? What happens with those?
Well, Jack Smith saw fit to abandon his quest, and arguably the felony convictions, these are not going to stand. And we have some saber rattling that maybe the charges will be brought in the future. It's clear a president cannot be convicted of crime during his time in office. So that's the question. What happens when he gets out? And there's so many different policy considerations. Do they want to pursue it? The state courts, the president is not protected in the state courts. Do we want the states going forward with these prosecutions? Clearly, for the next 4 years, assuming President Trump completes the term, he's untouchable. But we'll see what happens after. And again, he'll keep pushing it. His lawyers will keep pushing it. They were successful in a related situation with CNN, and George Stephanopoulos exacted $16 million, if I recall, $15 million plus $1 million for counsel fees for the libelous action filed against CNN.
Right.
That was very interesting. I know Mr. Stephanopoulos reportedly was not too happy about that result.
Circle back to the pardons. Biden seems to pardon another 100 people every single day, and another round, and we're all sort of waiting for him to pre-pardon his family members. What do you think is going to happen here in 2025 with the pardons?
It's tough. And as they said when they gave me the robe, they gave me a robe as a judge, but not a crystal ball. But I will say this. I think that he will exercise that power to the nth degree. I wasn't at all surprised at the pardoning of his son, even though he said he would not. Right. Some thought that maybe that extended meeting with President Trump was to hatch a deal that President Trump would pardon his son. No, I think we can anticipate family members being pardoned. This is an exercise in the Constitution. It's not liked by many scholars because it is basically unfettered. And let's remember that President Trump exercised the pardon power as well with Paul Manafort and others, and General Smith in Washington. This is a privilege of the president granted in the Constitution. A lot of people don't like it, and I expect President Biden will exercise it fully for all his friends and family members. If you could explain to everybody across the country, so now there is a caveat, a hiccup in this, is that if he's called to testify, if Hunter now is called to testify,
he has to testify now, right? He can't just plead the fifth on this, right?
I think arguably that is correct because there is no criminal exposure. Having been granted this blanket pardon for a 10-year period, one cannot invoke the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. On the other hand, I think he could use the advice of counsel defense that he may unknowingly say something that could expose him to criminality on the state or federal level. So he might invoke the Fifth. You might see a contempt charge brought. And once again, how far are we going to test these boundaries?
All right, let me ask you one more. It's a heavy one, though.
Sure.
These states now, there's a battle with abortion and throwing it back to the states. Clearly, constitutionally, I mean, at least seems like to me that it made the most sense. In your world, how do you see that?
Well, I don't think Congress is going to monkey with it anytime soon. And the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade, it's now up to states. I don't see Congress weighing in. I don't think the courts are going to weigh in. There's no particular case that's percolating to the United States Supreme Court. There's so many issues. And I think arguably the border and the economy drove this vote in the election, right? And there are many one-issue candidates, whether it's abortion, whether it's guns. And although these are legitimate issues, everybody's concerned about it. I think there's a lot of other things going on, not the least of which now are the conflict in the Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East. There's a lot on the table for Congress to deal with.
All right, I lied. I got one more quick one for you. If you see something big, do you see something big legally coming up on the horizon, something that the Supreme Court will have to jump in on and make a decision on?
Supreme Court, moving away, pivoting from President Trump for a moment, this AI and TikTok in particular. There is an order that by Congress banning TikTok. It's supposed to go into effect January 19th. The U.S. Supreme Court has fast-tracked this issue, and we'll be dealing with it on January 10th. And this is interesting. They've been ordered to divest to a U.S. entity. We have a social platform, First Amendment issues, but we've also got the intertangling of a government. The Chinese government is involved with this platform. And we all know they're mining information. This is not conspiracy theorist stuff. This is what's going on. So you have a clash. You have a clash of the national interest, and you have the First Amendment rights of a platform. Where does it go? The Supreme Court will weigh in on January 10th.
Judge John Nazzaro, former, again, retired, once a judge, always a judge, retired Supreme Court justice in Connecticut. Judge, what did I say? Supreme Court? I said Superior. All right. I want to give you a promotion. What can I tell you? You deserve one. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you coming on today, Judge John Nazzaro. All right. You're listening to the Mike Gallagher Show. We'll take a short break. We'll come right back. Stick around, everybody.